What was it like to serve in the Army in the 70s/80s? The 70s Army was all about discipline? No, it smelled like damp socks, bad soup, and one runaway chicken that nearly got us court-martialed. You probably think Army life in the 70s was all about discipline, shiny boots, and standing still for hours. Wrong. It smelled like damp socks, overcooked cabbage, and cigarette smoke you could cut with a knife. And that was just before breakfast. I still remember my first day in the barracks like it happened yesterday. The bus dropped us off at some forgotten military base where the wind felt colder than the inside of a fridge. I was 19, carrying a bag full of cheap soap, extra underwear, and a letter from my mother telling me to eat well. She clearly didn't know the cooks here. The building looked like a prison from a cheap Soviet movie. 3 floors, cracked windows, paint peeling off like sunburned skin. As soon as we stepped inside, the stench hit us, a mix of sweat, wet boots, and a mysterious odor that could only be described as veteran's revenge. Our sergeant, a man whose face looked like it had been carved out of old leather, stood there waiting. He didn't say welcome. He didn't even say hello. He just looked us up and down and said, "Congratulations, boys. You're no longer human. You're soldiers now." Then he smiled, and somehow that was even worse than if he'd yelled. We were shown to our bunks. Iron frames, thin mattresses, and blankets that smelled like they had been washed in the 60s and stored ever since in a shed full of cats. My bed was next to a guy named Petrov, a tall, skinny fellow with a mustache that looked older than him. He shook my hand and whispered, "Rule number 1, never fall asleep before the pranksters do." I laughed, thinking he was joking. Spoiler, he wasn't. That night, I learned the true meaning of barracks humor. Around midnight, I woke up to someone gently tying my boots together with a thin wire. The moment I tried to get out of bed, I nearly face-planted into the floor. The whole room burst out laughing like it was a live comedy show. The next morning, our training began. It didn't start with guns or tactics. No, it started with running in freezing weather because someone had left their locker unlocked. The sergeant made us sprint around the yard while shouting the Army's favorite word, "Faster." After the 3rd lap, I couldn't feel my ears, but Petrov cheerfully told me, "Don't worry. In a week, you won't feel anything at all." Meals were, let's just say, creative. The soup had more floating grease than liquid. The bread was so hard we joked it could be used as a weapon. And the meat, well, calling it meat was optimistic. Some claimed it was beef, others swore it was leftover shoe leather. But the funniest moment of that first week happened during inspection. Our sergeant was walking between the beds, looking for dust like it was his personal enemy. He got to one guy's locker, opened it, and froze. Inside was a live chicken. No one said a word. The sergeant just stared at it for a full 10 seconds, then slowly closed the locker and said, "Feed it. I'll be back tomorrow." We never asked where that chicken came from, but somehow it became the unofficial mascot of our unit. We even gave it a name, Comrade Cluck. Life in the Army was a mix of freezing mornings, strange food, endless drills, and a constant battle to avoid becoming the victim of the next prank. But something was changing in me. I didn't notice it right away, but I was starting to feel different, tougher, a little crazier, maybe. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened on the 3rd week, the night that made even the most hardened veterans look pale. You think the Army makes you fearless? No, the Army just makes you too tired to care, until something happens in the middle of the night, and suddenly you're wide awake, regretting every life choice that brought you there. It was the 3rd week of service. By then, I'd learned 2 things. Coffee in the barracks tasted like boiled mud. If Petrov started smiling for no reason, trouble was coming. That evening, Petrov had that smile. We were sitting on our bunks, polishing boots that would get muddy again in 5 minutes when he whispered, "Tonight, you'll meet her." I frowned. "Her who?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice like we were in some spy movie. "The barracks ghost." Now, I'm not a superstitious guy, but I also didn't want to look like a coward. So I just laughed. "Sure, Petrov. And I suppose she tucks you in at night?" Petrov didn't laugh back. He just shrugged and kept shining his boots. Lights out came at 2200 hours. The sergeant did his usual round, making sure no one was smoking or talking. Then the room fell silent, except for the occasional snore or rustle of blankets. Around midnight, I woke up, not because of noise. In fact, the silence was so heavy it felt unnatural. The air was cold, colder than usual, and I had that weird feeling you get when someone's watching you. At the far end of the room, next to the lockers, something moved. A shadow. Slow. Almost gliding. I told myself it was just one of the guys going to the bathroom. But then I saw it. A figure in a long white shirt, hair falling over its face, drifting silently past the bunks. My first thought, great. I'm in a bad horror movie. My second thought, if this thing comes closer, I'm moving to the chicken's bed. The figure stopped at Petrov's bed, and that's when he screamed. Not a normal scream, but a high-pitched shriek like a kettle about to boil over. Half the room jumped up, the other half fell out of their beds. The ghost spun around and ran toward the door, but the sheet it was wearing got caught on a bedpost, revealing none other than Corporal Mikhailov. Now, Mikhailov was a bored genius. Give him a day off and some old laundry, and he'd invent a way to terrorize the entire barracks. Apparently, he'd been sneaking around for weeks, convincing the newbies the place was haunted. Petrov, still pale, muttered, "I'm going to kill him." Mikhailov just grinned and said, "Consider it a training exercise for your nerves, comrades." We all thought it was over, just another prank. But the funny part came the next morning. During inspection, the sergeant noticed something strange. The chicken, Comrade Cluck, was missing from its usual corner. We searched everywhere. Under beds, inside lockers, even in the laundry room. Nothing. Then, right before lunch, a scream came from the officers' canteen. We rushed over and saw the colonel himself standing on a chair, while Comrade Cluck strutted proudly across the floor like she owned the place. The colonel glared at us. "Whose chicken is this?" Dead silence. Even Mikhailov shut his mouth for once. The colonel sighed. "Fine. She's my chicken now. Get back to work." And just like that, our mascot was gone, confiscated by the highest authority on the base. For the rest of the week, morale was low. No more chicken cheer us up, no more ridiculous pranks to distract us. Just drills, chores, and the occasional argument over whether the soup was made from cabbage or just boiled dishwater. But on Saturday night, something happened that made even the ghost prank look harmless. It started with a loud crash in the storage room and ended with the sergeant ordering us all outside in our underwear at 2 in the morning. There's nothing more humbling than standing outside in winter, in your underwear, while a man with a mustache yells at you about national security. That night, I'd been dreaming of being home. My mother was serving hot borscht, my bed was warm, life was good. Then, bang, a loud crash shook the entire barracks. My eyes shot open just in time to hear our sergeant's voice roar through the hallway. "Everybody out. Now." Half asleep and half frozen, we scrambled from our bunks. No time for pants, no time for boots. We just grabbed whatever we had on and ran. Petrov was wearing bright red boxer shorts with little ducks on them. Mikhailov had one sock on. I had nothing but my underwear and a confused expression. The moment we stepped outside, the cold punched me in the lungs. It felt like the air itself wanted me dead. Snow crunched under our bare feet as the sergeant paced in front of us, holding a flashlight like it was a weapon. Someone broke into the storage room. He barked. Until we find out who, nobody goes back inside. We all looked at each other. Who in their right mind would break into a storage room at 2 in the morning? There was nothing in there worth stealing, except maybe the spare uniforms and some old shovels. The sergeant ordered us to line up. That's when I noticed something strange. Footprints in the snow leading from the storage room to the woods. Big, heavy prints. And next to them, smaller ones. Chicken-sized ones. I elbowed Petrov. "Don't tell me," he whispered back. "Either Comrade Cluck escaped the colonel's kitchen, or she's working with the enemy." Before we could investigate, the sergeant barked at us again. "Form 2 lines. We're searching the perimeter." And so, in nothing but underwear and a healthy dose of misery, we marched around the base, shining flashlights into the darkness. Every few minutes, someone would slip on the ice and faceplant, which would have been funny if our toes weren't freezing off. Then we reached the woods. The footprints disappeared, replaced by chaos. Broken crates, torn sacks of grain, and in the middle of it all, Comrade Cluck herself, pecking happily at a pile of spilled oats. The sergeant just stared at her. His face twitched. Then, without a word, he picked up the chicken, tucked her under his arm, and turned to us. Back inside, all of you. And if anyone mentions this night to the colonel, you'll be cleaning latrines until the next war. We didn't need to be told twice. We rushed back inside like soldiers retreating from battle. The moment we hit the warmth of the barracks, we collapsed on our bunks, laughing like idiots. Even the sergeant cracked a small smile before muttering, "Get some sleep, idiots." The next morning, however, things took a strange turn. During roll call, the colonel himself appeared. He looked furious. "My chicken," he said slowly, "is gone." Nobody moved. The room was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the colonel's eyes landed on me. "You, new recruit. You know something?" I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. The truth was I did know something, like the fact that his prized chicken was currently hiding under Petrov's bed, wrapped in an old blanket like a baby. But before I could answer, the sergeant stepped forward. "Permission to handle this internally, sir." The colonel glared at him, then nodded and left. The moment the door closed, the sergeant turned to us and said, "All right, gentlemen, tonight, we're putting her back." And that's how I found myself, later that evening, on the most ridiculous mission of my military career, Operation Return the Chicken. It sounded simple. Sneak into the colonel's quarters, put Comrade Cluck back in her little coop, and leave without getting caught. But nothing in the army ever goes as planned, especially when Petrov is involved. We had no idea that this simple mission would turn into a full-blown disaster, involving an alarm, a broken window, and 3 soldiers hiding in a laundry basket. Every army has its secret missions. Some involve classified documents. Some involve dangerous reconnaissance. Ours involved returning a stolen chicken to the colonel without getting caught. It was already dark when the sergeant called us together. We huddled in the corner of the barracks, speaking in whispers like we were planning a bank robbery. Petrov held Comrade Cluck under his coat. The chicken looked surprisingly calm, as if she knew she was the star of tonight's operation. The plan was simple, too simple. Wait until the colonel was in his office. Sneak through the back corridor to his quarters. Put Comrade Cluck back in her coop and leave. I should have known that when Petrov says simple, it means guaranteed disaster. Step 1 went fine. We peeked into the office window and saw the colonel at his desk, reading papers and sipping tea. Step 2 also went well. We crept through the dark corridor, boots off to stay quiet, moving like shadows. Then came step 3, and that's when things fell apart. Petrov handed me the chicken and whispered, "Wait here. I'll check the door." He tiptoed forward, tested the handle, and it squeaked. Not a small squeak, the kind of squeak that could wake the dead. We froze. Inside, the colonel stopped writing. His chair creaked. Footsteps approached the door. Petrov hissed, "Hide." The nearest hiding spot was a giant laundry basket in the corner. I dove in, holding Comrade Cluck close. Petrov squeezed in beside me, and somehow Mikhailov appeared out of nowhere and climbed in too. We were now 3 grown men and 1 chicken crammed into a wicker basket. The door opened. Light spilled into the corridor. I held my breath. The colonel stepped out, looking around suspiciously. His eyes scanned the hallway, then the basket. He walked toward us, step by step. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Comrade Cluck, sensing the tension, decided this was the perfect time to cluck loudly. The colonel stopped right in front of us. My brain screamed, "This is it. We're done. They'll send us to Siberia for chicken theft." But just then, the base alarm went off, a deafening siren that made us all jump. The colonel cursed, turned, and ran toward the main gate. We didn't wait to find out what was happening. We jumped out of the basket and bolted down the hall, still carrying the chicken. The alarm was still blaring, and soldiers were running everywhere. Outside, we saw the cause of the chaos. One of the supply trucks had rolled into a ditch, blocking the gate. The colonel was busy yelling at the driver, which meant his quarters were unguarded. "This is our chance," Petrov shouted. We sprinted to the coop behind the colonel's building, shoved Comrade Cluck inside, and closed the latch. Mission accomplished. We exchanged triumphant grins, feeling like heroes. Then we heard a voice behind us. "And what exactly are you three doing here?" We turned slowly. It wasn't the colonel. It was the base cook, a short, round woman with a temper so legendary we called her the Soup General. Her eyes narrowed. "Is that the chicken I was supposed to roast for tomorrow's lunch?" We panicked. Mikhailov stammered, "No, this is a different chicken." She folded her arms. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Before we could respond, she grabbed the chicken and marched toward the kitchen. We just stood there, watching our beloved Comrade Cluck being carried away to her doom. Petrov muttered, "We can't let her do this. We're saving her." And that's how Operation Return the Chicken instantly transformed into Operation Chicken Rescue, a far riskier mission, because now we had to steal her from the kitchen without getting caught by the Soup General. We didn't know it yet, but this rescue would turn the entire base upside down and end with us being summoned to the colonel's office, where the real surprise was waiting. If you've never tried to steal a chicken from a military kitchen, let me save you some time. Don't. It's harder than sneaking past enemy lines, and 10 times more dangerous if the cook catches you. After the Soup General marched off with Comrade Cluck, we knew we had to act fast. Petrov, Mikhailov, and I sat in the barracks, whispering like conspirators. "Petrov, we go in through the back door." "Me, it's locked." "Mikhailov, we'll climb through the window." "Me, it's the kitchen window. It's above the stove, while the stove is on." But there was no time to argue. Dinner was in 2 hours, which meant our feathery comrade's life expectancy was short. We waited until the Soup General left to fetch more potatoes. Then we made our move. The kitchen's back door was indeed locked, so Mikhailov boosted me up to the window. The smell of boiling cabbage hit me like a wall. Inside, Comrade Cluck was sitting in a crate, looking at me with what I swear was a judgmental glare, as if saying, "Took you long enough." I slid through the window, burning my elbow on a hot pan in the process, and gently lifted her out. But just as I was about to pass her to Petrov outside, the Soup General came back. Her eyes locked on me. My brain had 3 thoughts in quick succession. I'm dead. She's faster than she looks. Run. I leapt through the window, chicken in hand, and we bolted. The Soup General screamed behind us like a banshee, waving a ladle as if it were a sword. Soldiers in the yard stopped what they were doing to watch the spectacle. 3 recruits sprinting across the base in full daylight with a chicken flapping wildly. And then, as if the situation wasn't absurd enough, the colonel stepped out of his office right in our path. We skidded to a halt. Petrov nearly dropped the chicken. The colonel's voice was calm, but deadly. "Would someone like to explain why my soldiers are kidnapping my lunch?" No one spoke. Even Comrade Cluck seemed to sense the gravity of the moment and stopped squawking. The colonel sighed. "Follow me." We were marched into his office like prisoners. He sat behind his desk, steepling his fingers, and stared at us for what felt like an hour. Finally, he said, "I know all about your extracurricular activities. The ghost prank, the midnight parade, the mysterious disappearance of my chicken." Petrov swallowed. "Sir, we just liked her." The colonel's eyebrow twitched. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that made us glance at each other in shock. "Boys," he said, "you remind me of my own unit back in the 60s. Always causing trouble, but never without heart." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm transferring this chicken to your care. She's officially your responsibility. But if she disappears again, I'll have you scrubbing the base with toothbrushes until you retire." "Understood." We nodded furiously. And just like that, Comrade Cluck became ours again, not as a stolen pet, but as the official mascot of the unit. We built her a proper coop behind the barracks, fed her better than ourselves, and even made her a tiny helmet from an old mess tin. She lived through the rest of our service, becoming a legend on the base. New recruits would hear the story of the great chicken escape, and we'd smile, knowing we were the idiots who made it happen. Army life in the 70s/80s was tough. Freezing mornings, bad food, endless drills. But it was also full of laughter, ridiculous moments, and bonds you couldn't break. And every time I think back to those days, I remember the pranks, the late-night chaos, and one very stubborn chicken who somehow brought the whole unit together. Because in the end, the Army taught me many things. How to march, how to shoot, how how to clean a rifle in the dark. But most importantly, how to keep a chicken alive in the middle of a military base without getting court-martialed.